Okay. The Gemara in Shabbos brings down a fascinating description of what the Gemara calls humility. The Gemara calls this the epitome of a nova. Tana Rabbanan, the Brisa teaches us, La'olam ya'adam anvanosan ki Hillel, a man should always be as humble as Hillel, v'lo yekaplan kishamai, and he shouldn't be makbid, he shouldn't be, I guess you'd say, demanding, hard, very tokif, very strong like Shammai. And the Gemara is then going to give us this example, the ultimate example of humility. Maisa Mishnei Bnei Adam, there was an event with two people who wagered one with the other. Amru, they said, Kol mi sheyelech v'yakaneh et Hillel, whoever will go and get Hillel angry, yitol arba mea zuz, will take 400 zuz. Now, if you remember from the time of the Gemara, 200 zuz was a ksuba, that's about what a woman could live on for an entire year. 400 zuz was a fortune of money. They wagered who was going to get Hillel angry. Finally, one of them said, Ani akitenu, I'm going to do it. I'll take the bet. Osiyom Erev Shabbos haya, the man waited until Erev Shabbos. Hillel chafif es roshu, he specifically waited till the time when Hillel was bathing. Halach vava pisach beso. This man went and passed right by the entrance to Hillel's house. Omar, he stood there and said, Mikan Hillel, Mikan Hillel. Is there somebody called Hillel? Is there a Hillel person around here? Nisatef Yosef L'Kroso, Hillel got dressed, went out to meet him, and he said the words, Beni, my son, Matam Avakesh, my son, what do you request? Amar Lo, the man answered, She'ela yesh li lisho, I have a question to ask. Amar Lo, Sha'al Beni, Sha'al, ask my son, ask. Mipnei ma roshem shabavloim sal golgolos. Why is it that the heads of the bavloim are flat? Very tif kasha. Amalo, Hillel's answer, Beni, my son, Sheila Gedola Shalta. You asked a very great question. And the answer is, because the midwives are not very skilled, and in the process of giving birth, apparently somehow they flatten the head. The man did not succeed in getting Hillel angry. The man was not deterred. He waited for a certain while. He came back. And the same thing. Mikan Hillel, is there a guy Hillel around here? Again, Hillel gets dressed, comes out. Beni matam avakesh, my son, what do you want? Amalo, same words. She'ela yesh li lishol, I have a question to ask. Sha'al Beni, ask my son, ask. Mipnei ma ineim shel tarmudim terudos. Why is it that the eyes of the tarmudim are on a slant? Another major philosophical question. Amalo, Hillel's response, Beni she'ela gedola shalta, you asked a major question. Why is that? Because they live amongst the sand, and as a protection for their eyes, they grow that way. The man again was not deterred. He went and came a certain while, and he came back a third time, same routine. Mikan Hillel, is there somebody named Hillel? Hillel again a third time got dressed and came out to greet him. Beni matam avakesh, my son, what do you request? Sheila yesh lishol, I have another question to ask. Sha'al Beni, Sha'al, ask. Ma ragleim shel Afrikim rechovos. Why is it that the feet of the Afrikim are wide? Not a halachic question, not a philosophical question, a very, very frivolent, irrelevant question. At this point, Hillel's response is, She'ela gedola sha'alta, you asked a very great question. The answer is, because they live amongst the ocean and their feet are wide, it protects them, it helps them. At which point the man realized that he was in trouble because he had attempted 3 major real attempts, didn't succeed, and then he came with the final request. Shelos harbe yesh li lishol, I have many questions to ask, but I'm afraid that you're going to get angry. Nesatef, Hillel sort of garbed himself further, sat down in front of him and said, Kol she'elo sheyesh lecha lishol shal, any questions that you have to ask. Amalo, this man said, Atu Hillel, shekor nascha nasi Yisrael, you're Hillel, that they call you the Nasi Yisrael. Amalohein, he said, yes. Amalo, he said, Im ata hu, if you're Hillel, lo yarbu kemoscha Yisrael, there should be no more like you in Yisrael. Amalo, Hillel said, Bini, why do you say that? What do you mean? Because he said, because of you I lost 400 zuz, and therefore there should be no more like you. Amalo, Hillel answered back, Havizah beruchacha, be very careful with your words. Kidaihu Hillel, it's worthy to have Hillel. Shetovet al yado arba mea zuz, the arba mea zuz, it's worthy that you should lose 400 zuz and 400 zuz, and Hillel should not be makbid. Hillel should not lose his temper, his cool. Okay, now, before we ask any questions on this Gemara, let's understand what was going on. And the Maharsha spends a good amount of time explaining to us that this man who came to get Hillel angry was not casual, not cavalier, not just doing something without thought. The Maharsha explains that every step was carefully planned. Number one, he waited to Erev Shabbos. If you're not quite sure about this, pay careful attention to the Shalom Bayis just around lichbenching time, because you'll note that even normally calm houses have a very different tone, and the edginess, the propensity to people losing their cool is much greater right then. So he waits till Erev Shabbos. When Hillel is busy in the bathing, he comes to the door and he says the words, is there a guy named Hillel around here? Now my friends, keep in mind, Hillel was the Nasi Yisrael. He was arguably the single most significant, important person in the Jewish nation. Politically, he certainly was, but he was obviously famous beyond description. Wherever he went, crowds of people waited on the great Hillel. Is there somebody called Hillel here? An obvious insult. But not only that, the Maharsha points out, he stands on the footstep of Hillel's house and he says, is there somebody called Hillel around here? Waiting for Hillel to come out to him. So not only don't you know my name, but you expect me to come out to you. It's Erev Shabbos, I'm busy, I'm the Nasi Yisrael, you don't know my name, and you expect me to come out to you. And then, what's the major question that he asks? Why do they have flat heads? Why do these people have eyes that are shaped differently? Why do these people have feet that are wide? Pretty irrelevant, pretty silly questions to be asking me on Erev Shabbos, time after time. And then he hits on the final one. He says these words, I have many questions to ask you, but I'm afraid that you're going to get angry. And that was the real kicker. And I'll explain to you why. Do you know who I am? I'm the Nasi Yisrael. Not only am I the Nasi Yisrael, I come out to you, I have all the patience in the world, and you think you're going to get me angry? You think you'll get me angry? You'll never see me. And the Maharsha explains that every one of these is a step-by-step attempt, and very wise attempt, to get Hillel to lose his cool, but Hillel didn't. Okay, now this is a beautiful story, and well worth understanding, well worth reviewing, but here's what I consider the very, very obvious question. The Gemara is teaching us the wrong lesson. The Gemara is bringing this as an example of a man should always be as humble as Hillel. This has nothing to do with humility. This has to do with something called anger management. Meaning, Hillel is a type of person who clearly worked on his kas, spent many years, spent much time learning to control himself, learning not to lose his temper. And if I were writing this Gemara, I would say, man should never lose his temper. Look where level a person could get in developing his kas. But the Gemara doesn't quote this as an example of anger management. The Gemara quotes this as an example of humility, of anova. And the question is, what's pshat? Why does the Gemara attribute these series of controlling his temper to humility when it seems to be much more an issue of kas, of anger management? So I'd like to see if we can answer that question this evening. But before we do that, I want to make a very important observation. They say that even a Sefer Torah needs a mazel. And what that means in plain language is you could have a Sefer Torah that's read every single Monday and Thursday. You could have a Sefer Torah that's only read every Shabbos. Sometimes you have a Sefer Torah that's only taken out on the Moadim. And then sometimes you could have a Sefer Torah that sits in the Aron Kodesh for years and is never read from. And the Gemara says this expression, even a Sefer Torah needs a mazel, that it actually should be used. Okay. Now, I say similarly, even a mitzvah needs a mazel. There are some mitzvahs that are very, very popular. They get a lot of fanfare. They're very well known and well used. And there's some mitzvahs that are not quite so popular. You can't even think about going through a sukkah without a lulav and esrog. You can't even imagine Pesach without matzah. It's a given. But there's some mitzvahs that are kind of what I call lonely, poor, abandoned mitzvahs. Amongst those, I count the mitzvah say of working on one's midos. If you look in the Monei Mitzvahs, if you look in the Rambam, the Mishnah Berurah Paskins this way, there is a mitzvah saseh, a full mitzvah saseh, just like eating matzah on Pesach, just like wearing tzitzits on a four-cornered beged. There's a full obligation upon a Jew to be mesakein, to improve his midos. Not just to act in a good way, not just to do chesed, but to actually take your midos from point A to point B to improve them. And the emphasis there is on working. You see, sometimes we make a mistake. You'll see a guy who's really a nice guy. Oh, what a lovely fellow, such good midos. And we look up to him, and there's good reason to look up to him. But you see, at the end of the day, the criteria that a human is judged on is one. What point did you start at? And what point did you end at? If a person was born with a very, very easygoing nature, very humble, kindly and giving, it's nice to see. He's a good person to have as your friend, but that doesn't mean when we come to Olam HaEmes that he's going to be a shining light. I personally know of somebody I went to yeshiva with who was bombastic. I mean, he was about as arrogant as they come. I met him some 20 years later, a different human being. Now, I don't know if now you'd call him the most humble guy in the world, but he's vastly different. And I do know that that person in Olam HaEmes is going to shine because he started here and he dramatically improved himself. And at the end of the day, that is this mitzvah. The mitzvah is not to have good midos because you were born that way, but to take your midos, take your character traits, whether it be anger, whether it be humility, whether it be kindliness, whether it be the full gamut of all of the character traits, and improve them. Now, the reason why I think this mitzvah is a little bit unpopular is for two reasons. Number one, typically, I think we take the following attitude. Listen, this stuff about changing your midos and being kindly and good and humble, I would love to do it. But, a leopard can't change its spots. It's my nature. This is who I am. I have a fierce temper. I'm just a very arrogant guy. That's just my nature. Listen, I don't wish I were that way, but I just am. I wake up in the morning and I think I'm God's gift to humanity. That's the way it is. I never asked for this. I didn't say Hashem put in my heart lots of gaiva, but that's what it is. So I think the first problem is that we assume a leopard can't change its spots. That's my nature, and that's what it is. And even when we attune ourselves to the fact that Chazal say you can change, and if there's specifically a mitzvah to change, obviously it's possible. The second problem that we get to is, okay, I'm motivated, but how do I do it? Okay, I wake up in the morning and I feel very, very self-important. Heart, don't feel self-important. I do. I don't want to, but I do. Don't be angry. But I'm furious. I don't want to get angry, but I'm livid. I'm furious. Now what? You see, midos are inner conditions. If you tell me to pick up a little of an esrog, whether I want to do it or I don't want to do it, I pick it up. But you're telling me control who I am. How do I change my nature? How do I change the essence of me? And I'd like to spend some time on exactly that, and let's deal with kas, with anger, because that's the title of the Shmuz, anger management. And I'd like to spend a few minutes on dealing with how one works on anger. So let me begin with the following observation. Anger is not logical. And what I mean by that is as follows. Imagine you walk in the afternoon, you walk into your boss's office, and he starts writing you like there's no yesterday. He's ranking you out, and he's being abusive and really, really cutting. You're angry. But you're not just angry. You get in a car, and every word that he says plays over and over like a tape recorder again and again. And it's an hour drive home, and it's 1 hour of hearing every word louder and louder and louder. You left his office angry. By the time you get to your house, you're livid, you're furious. You're so angry, you storm into your house, and you run right up to your bedroom, you close the door, and you smash your fist right through your bedroom door. Now, that is dumb. Why? If you punched your boss, we could discuss whether that's intelligent or not. But you breaking your bedroom door in anger doesn't do anything. Your boss sure don't care, it's not his door, so what did you accomplish? Now, the answer is obvious, and of course it's dumb. Midos, character traits, are not intellectually driven, they're not intelligent, they're almost what we call emotions. They're much more within the person's sort of inner nature. According to the real understanding, they come from the nefesh habahami. They come from the physical nature of man and their reactions. They're not intellectual. It's not my brain saying, I think it's a real good idea for me to take my fist, clench it, and smash it through that door because I will accomplish much. It's a reaction within me. Now, once we understand that it's a nefesh habahami, it's a internal, again, loosely translated in the world of psychology, they like to call it emotion. It's not quite accurate because it's directly tied to the nefesh habahami, to the physical nefesh. But once we understand that it's not a logical manifestation, nor is it directly controlled by logic, rather it's a separate midah, we can begin working on it. Now, the first step in working on anger, I think, is something that we have to understand in terms of how one increases it or decreases it. And the best mashal I have for this is something that I learned the hard way. One of the lessons that they don't teach you in yeshiva, and I don't think they teach it in college either, is how to be an Abba. Now, I discovered this lesson the hard way because I think I was giving shir, and shir ended, let's say, 12:30, and my child's fourth birthday party was at 1:30. I had 1 hour to blow up something like 100 balloons, besides setting up the tables, etc., etc., etc. So I sat there, and I took the first balloon, second one, third, fourth, fifth. By about number 10, and I'm realizing that I have another 90 to go, and that's when I discovered the key. And remember this, folks. If you don't know this already, but if you do, you can repeat it. And that is, before you blow up the balloon, stretch it. Because when you stretch the balloon, it's much, much easier to then blow it up. You don't hyperventilate, and you could blow up your 100 balloons within that hour's time. That, my friends, I think is a very apt mashal for anger. You see, anger has a measure. You could measure anger based on frequency, how often you get angry. You can measure anger based on intensity, how angry you get. And you can measure anger based on duration, how long you stay angry. But here's the point. If you'd like to know how to work on anger, and this may sound simplistic, but if you want to work on anger, all you have to do is don't get angry. And if you don't get angry, you work on anger. But I don't mean that in a simplistic way. I mean it in a very deep manner. And that's as follows. This midah called anger starts like a balloon. It's very tight. And initially, it's going to take a lot to get you angry. It's going to take a real event, something that really gets you ticked to get you angry to this size. But once you get angry here, it's much easier to get you angry there the next time because the balloon's stretched. And if one time somebody really, really ticks you off in public, embarrasses you, and you're fully enraged, what you've now done is stretch that midah, and it's now easier to get to that point the next time. The intensity, the duration is much easier to attain. And the midah of anger is much like a balloon. If you get to a certain point, it's easier the next time. If you get to that point often, it's very easy to get there. And if you find that you've stretched that balloon out, so again, your frequency, your intensity, and your duration will be like clockwork all the time, all the time. How do you work on the midah? The opposite is also true. If you don't get angry, what happens is the balloon starts tightening, starts shrinking. The way Hashem created the midah is such that if you don't get angry for a certain amount of time, if normally your frequency was once a day, and for a week you don't get angry, what happens is the balloon sort of tightens a bit. And if you continue not getting angry, it tightens some more. And if for a longer period you don't get angry, you can shrink it back so that it would take a huge event now to get you angry again. And again, much like that balloon, it increases and decreases based on usage. And that is the key to working on the midah of kas. Now, that is rather easy, because all you have to do is not get angry, and then you've perfected that character trait, and it's real simple. The problem is, how do you not get angry? How do you not get ticked off when you're amongst people who bother you, people who say things, people who get under your skin, and you lose your temper? And that's the difficult part. And I'd like to share with you some techniques for not getting angry. And to do that, I think what we have to do is we have to study what I call the anatomy of a rage. If you watch yourself, now usually we work in microseconds. You know, the person says to me, I'm gone. But if you break it down, you'll see that there's a sort of progression. Someone says something to me. Now, initially, I hear it, and I feel kind of ticked. And that really wasn't nice. What happens then is it starts building. You know something? It really, really wasn't nice. As a matter of fact, that was chutzpah, and I can't believe he did it, and what I did for him, and I can't believe how much I spent time and effort to help, and he said that, and you know, and that anger starts building and building and building until the volcano erupts, and you have yourself a major explosion. But you see, here's the point. It always begins as a very little kind of itch, kind of like I'm ticked. He says something, and I'm ticked. At that point, any one of us are fully capable of stopping it. I will not give in. I can control it. The problem is, I don't stop it there. I allow it to start festering. You know something? He really said that. I can't believe he said, I can't. And I get angrier and angrier and angrier. And once it gets to the volcano erupting, there is no gibor amongst us who could ever dream of stopping it. Because the power, the energy, that midah exploding is something that you have to be an awesome, awesome gibor to fight, and I don't know if any of us can. However, at the just little bit ticked off stage, any one of us could stop it. The problem is that it grows. And I'd like to share with you something that is unknown, certainly in the world of psychology, certainly in the world of pop psychology, is vastly mistaken. You ever hear the expression, when you get angry, vent it? Right? You get angry, you should vent it, because if you vent it, you'll release steam and you'll calm down and everything will be fine and dandy. The Orcha Tzadikim is very descriptive and very clear when he says these words. Hashtika, being silent, is mevatel hakas. That undoes anger. So too a low voice. However, if a man raises his voice in anger, if a man speaks in anger, what happens is it increases his anger level after level after level, because he starts just a little bit ticked, but then he gets angrier and angrier and angrier until I'm furious. And venting doesn't calm you down. Venting increases, dramatically increases, and venting takes you from a little bit ticked to being enraged, to being a volcano exploding. And this, my friends, I believe is a tremendous yesod in understanding how to work on anger. I'll explain to you why. As you see, I speak with a mic now. The reason for that is somewhere in my high school teaching career, I ruined my voice, and even in the classroom, a small classroom, I needed a microphone to teach with. So I began teaching with a wireless mic, and I don't remember exactly when it was, but at some point along the time, we had just learned about Kas, we had learned the Musar Seder, and one of the guys in the shir was doing something that he shouldn't be doing, whether it be throwing spitballs or rolling on the floor, or whatever it may be. And I kind of looked at the guy and gave him a look. And another guy in the shir said, Rebbe, did you notice the speaker? I said, what do you mean? He said, the speaker, like there was some static. As soon as you got like a little bit upset at the guy, it was static. I didn't think about it. Go on teaching, back and forth. Another guy does something, whatever he shouldn't have done, and I kind of look at him, and the same guy says, Rebbe, did you hear the speaker? And it turned out, now again, I do not know whether there was some aura or maybe just I was rubbing, but bottom line is, every time I would get that sort of like a little bit ticked at one of the guys, there was a lot of static coming out of the speaker, and it cured my anger in that situation. And you see, the reason is because once I'm a tiny bit ticked, it's simple as pie to stop it. You said something, and it wasn't nice, and I'm a little bit ticked. It doesn't take much to just say, okay, whatever, leave it and walk away. At that point, it's easy to stop the anger. It's when it grows and builds and becomes that volcano that it's difficult. And for that reason, one of the techniques to work on anger, and this is a very, very effective technique, is to carry around an index card in your pocket. You say, for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to work on my anger. This technique will bring you very, very far. You keep an index card in your pocket, and anytime you feel yourself ticked, not angry, not furious, just a little bit annoyed, you take out the index card and make a mark. And invariably what you're going to find is you won't get angry. Because at that initial stage, I'm a little bit upset. You said something wasn't nice. I'm a little bit ticked, but I can prevent it. I can control it. And what that index card does is it makes me self-aware. And once I'm aware, most of the time, the anger can be quenched, it can be stopped. And this is a great cure for many, many situations of anger. If you get to it before you get really angry, to use it. And this will work for a lot of what I call like low-level anger. What happens, how do you work on the really big deal stuff? When people do things, whether it be a spouse, whether it be a child, whether it be a boss, a worker, when they do something that really, really gets you angry, the self-awareness stuff doesn't work because you get so quickly angry that it just isn't quick enough. So for that, there's one other system that's very, very helpful for working on anger. And to understand that system, I think what we have to do is sort of reanalyze this thing called rage, go back to the anatomy of rage, and understand that we really skipped a step. See, I told you guys as follows. Somebody says something, I feel a little tick, a little bit angry, then it grows and it grows and it grows, and eventually I explode. But that's really skipping a key step in the anatomy of a rage. And to share with you that step, I'd like to give you the following. Most women find somewhere in the first or second year of their marriage something similar to the following event happening. She's walking with her husband in the street on Shabbos. They're walking on this side of the street, and all of a sudden she hears from the other side of the street a guy call out in a very loud voice, "Hey, you're one ugly guy and you're a geek." Oh my God, rude comment. And she sees her husband turn, and she sees her husband walk across the street right up to the guy, and her husband hugs the guy. "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" "Oh, yeah, yeah." Turns out, high school buddies, and that's guy talk. Guy talk, "Hey, you're ugly, you're still a geek." Just guy talk, which again, usually, typically, women don't talk. If you go into Beis Yaakov, you don't hear that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit shocking, but that's normal. But you see, my friends, here's the point. When I'm on this side of the street, and I hear from the other side of the street, "Hey, you're ugly," I don't get angry right away. There's a split second of interpretation. Who said it? Why did he say it? Where are we? What does this mean? I look, I see, and now I interpret what he said. "Oh, it's my old buddy. Yeah, I'm ugly, you're ugly. Yeah." You see, that's a nanosecond. It's in a fraction of a second, but that fraction of a second, the interpretation, is the exact determinant of whether that begins as a moment of kas or whether it doesn't. And there are 3 ways that a person can change your interpretation. There are 3 ways, 3 techniques that you can change that with. I once heard the Rishiva say as follows. Whatever event gets you angry, whether it be somebody snobbing you, somebody stepping on your toes, somebody calling you something, whatever that event is, imagine if 10 minutes before that event, you just found out that you won the lotto. $10 million, wow! And the guy does whatever. Steps on your toe, snobs you, calls you something, whatever. What would you do? The answer is you would hug him. "Oh, did you hear the news? Oh, great, great, great." You see, simcha, happiness, is a huge, huge factor in kas. If you're really, really happy, if you really have inner joy, then it's difficult to get angry. And the flip side, things are going badly. You're down. You've gotten beat up with the various things of life. It's much easier to get angry, and you're going to find yourself ticked a lot more. You're going to find yourself short-tempered, and it's a very wise person who recognizes that. And when you're in one of those moods, you're extra careful, maybe you calm down before you speak to people, etc. But happiness, inner simcha, has a dramatic effect in the interpretation. Now, this one is very hard to work on because the solution is to be happy. But as you know, happiness is the most elusive state of being that the human has been pursuing for millennia. We have the answer. The answer is when a person understands why he's here, when a person's growing, when a person has a reason for existing, a purpose, then they're happy. And ultimately, the way to work on anything is to grow in learning, in your shamayim, in your purpose. Then you find inner joy, and automatically this thing called anger lessens. But that's a long process, difficult to get to. The second way of changing interpretations is also not so easy. And that's something the Chovos HaLevavos explains to us. He says, when you go to school, your parents at some point teach you how to take a compliment. Right? How do you take a compliment? Be gracious, say thank you very much, and smile. You're taught how to take a compliment. But they don't teach you how to take an insult. But the Chovos HaLevavos says, and I'll tell you how to take an insult. The way you take an insult is you say to yourself as follows. This person is a shliach. He's a pawn. Hashem is speaking to me. And I thank Hashem for revealing to me what my chasarn is. This person is not even an entity. Imagine for a minute, I'm speaking here, and you hear my voice coming out of a loudspeaker, and I call you a bleepity bleep. And you walk over to the loudspeaker, smash it right in the subwoofer. I'll show that loudspeaker. It's foolish. Because I'm speaking through the loudspeaker. Says the Chovos HaLevavos, Bitachon means understanding that nothing occurs to a human. Nothing good, nothing bad, no pain, no affliction will come to you that's not directed from Hashem. When this person insults me, he's speaking from Hashem. He's but a pawn. He's no one. Hashem is speaking to me, revealing to me something that I need to know. Therefore, there's no anger because I appreciate that which Hashem is revealing to me, and there's no kas. Now, that is beautiful, and that is a wonderful midah, but it takes years and years and years to really inculcate that when a guy actually opens his mouth and says something very, very nasty. So, number one, in terms of changing your perspective, your interpretation, obviously, is simcha, being happy. That takes an awful long time. Number two method of changing your interpretation is to understand that everything is from Hashem, bitachon, but that takes a long time. But it's a third way that's much quicker and much easier to work on. And I'll share with you what that is. There was a story, I think it was in the late 70s, when a gentleman was on the Lower East Side, and he was standing on this side of the street, and he called to his son across the street to come here. Called his 13-year-old son to come and join him on that side of the street. And a few moments after the man called for his son, Rav Moshe Feinstein, the Gadol Hador, walked over to him and said, "Yes, can I help you?" And the man was baffled. It didn't make sense. Like, in Children Shiva, you called me. It took quite a number of moments until the fellow pieced together what had happened. His 13-year-old son was named Moshe. Moshe, come here. The Gadol Hador of Moshe Feinstein at the age of 80 heard the words, Moshe, come here. He crossed the street and said, "Yes, can I help you?" Now that is a beautiful example of humility. You call me? You know who I am? I'm Rav Moshe Feinstein. You know my word goes from here across the planet. You know how many people wait to hear my psak and they wait on me? Who am I? Me, Mani calls. A Jew calls me. I come. Well, what's the question? You see, humility is a huge, huge factor in how you handle life. If you are an arrogant person, if you puff up the balloon really big, I guarantee your ego is going to be stepped on all the time. Do you know how chashuv I am? You know how big and important I am? Nowhere do I get the covet I deserve. Nowhere do I get the honor and prestige that's coming to me. And everybody steps on my toes. And everybody says insulting words that are great me. And one of the keys to really having an annoying life is to be arrogant. Because the arrogant person with a very large ego is constantly getting hit on that ego. Masha Ein Kain, if you're humble, very simple person. Who am I? He calls me across the street, fine. I say this. Who am I? I'm not such a chashuv, big, important person. I'm a little person, and as a result, you don't get angry quite so often. I once told Rabbi Dvidus, Rosh Yeshiva in Rochester, we were talking about a certain person who was Lituelis. I said, he's a Baal Gaiva. Rabbi Dvidus said, well, you think so? How many times does he get into fights? I said, well, what's the difference? He said, no. If you were really a Baal Gaiva, as you're saying, you'd be getting into fights all the time. Why? Because if you're really arrogant and you're really that buffoon, then your ego is always exposed. Everyone's always hitting that very raw, exposed ego. And as a result, you'd always be in fights. And the fact that he's not is a clear raya that he's not a Baal Gaiva. My friends, I believe that that's the answer to Hillel. You know how it is that Hillel did not get angry? It was only because of humility. Had he been even a remotely arrogant person, there's no way in the world he could have possibly not gotten angry. And in fact, what the Maharsha points out to us is that every step along the way was a test to his humility. Mikan Hillel, is there a guy named Hillel? Chutzpah, you don't know I'm the great Hillel? On the other hand, because he was the great Hillel, who am I? He doesn't know my name. So everybody's supposed to know my name. I'm so chashuv. The man waits there. Erev Shabbos, when I'm in the bath, he waits there on the doorstep for me to come out to him. No, I'll come out. I'm not such a chashuv person anyway, so I'll come out. What's the big deal? I have a big question to ask you. What's the big question? Why are the Babylonians' heads flat? This is what you're bothering me? You know, Talmidim wait weeks, months to ask me questions. They put it in writing. It goes to an undersecretary. Maybe it goes to another secretary. Maybe if they're fortunate, it actually comes to my doorstep. And you're stopping me Erev Shabbos to ask me this question? If you were arrogant. But because you say, oh, no question to you, it's a big deal. Let me hear. It's a good question. I hear. I don't want to. I hear. The answer is because the midwives aren't so smart. But then he comes back again. A chutzpah, you didn't learn the first time not to bother a great nasi with such narishkeit? If you're arrogant. But because he was Hillel, no, the man has a question. How could I not answer him? And the third time the same. But watch the last step. The last step is, I have many, many questions to ask, but I'm afraid I'm going to get you angry. Me angry? Haven't I demonstrated humility to you yet? Haven't I proven to you that I'm the guy who's so humble, there's nobody humble like me in the entire world? Oh, the ultimate test of Gaiva. However, because Hillel was in fact so humble and so simple in his own mind, listen, I have all the time, ask me the questions, ask as much as you like. And the reason why this Gemara pins this great event on humility is because humility is the underpinning that allowed Hillel not to get angry. Because had he had kas, that instant interpretation, the moment he said those words, it would have exploded, he would have been angry, there would have been no control. The reason why he wasn't angry is because the interpretation was each time and every time, mi'ani, ma'ani, who am I? Therefore, it didn't bother him, it didn't touch him, and it didn't get him angry. And my friends, I'd like to share with you what I consider a huge chiddush in kas. All anger is really frustration from a lack of power. If you look in the Rishonim, they say the following expression: Hashem can't get angry. Whenever you see the psukim describing Hashem charon af, Hashem with anger, that's a description of Hashem using midos for our benefit, for our understanding. But the Rishonim explain Hashem can't get angry. Why? Because why does he need to get angry? He would just destroy the person, just eliminate it. You see, all anger really stems from a frustration of powerlessness. And you did that to me. How could you have done that? I'm so angry because you did that to me and I can't control it. Now, that is dramatically dependent on your sense of self. I'm a chashuv, important, powerful, weighty man. And you did that to me? On the other hand, who am I? I'm a little person. What do I know? How much power do I have anyway? I'm a boss of a dome. Tomorrow I cannot even get up. So you said that, so what? You see, that frustration, that anger is dramatically dependent on your sense of gaiva. And it's not just the interpretation, but the whole midah of kas pivots on gaiva. The more gaiva, the more sense of being thwarted in my power, being stepped on my ego. Obviously, the more interpretation for the Ra. But the less ego there is there, the less there is to feel frustrated, to feel powerless, because I'm fully cognizant that I'm powerless. I got that. I'm made of flesh and blood. When I cut my skin, the very blood spills out. I can't even control whether I'm going to exist tomorrow or not. So what power do I have? Once you get that, so it's difficult to get angry. And these concepts, my friends, I think go a long way. When a person decides that he wants to work on this midah, and you spend your limited amount of time, say 2 weeks, maybe a month, working on it, the first thing you have to do is use your index card. Become self-aware. Because it's when you get ticked, when you get just slightly ticked, anybody could stop it. All you got to do is say stop, and it's done. If every time you feel yourself get ticked, you take out your index card, you will, most of the time, you're not going to get angry. But it's a second part, the very difficult situations that requires much deeper work. And that much deeper work is based on reinterpreting all of the stimuli. Just like when the fellow's walking across the street and he hears from across the way, "You're stupid, you ugly guy," he has to first interpret. Those words don't instantly get me angry. There's a nanosecond. That nanosecond of interpretation, there are things that vastly change your interpretation. And the thing that most affects your interpretation is your sense of arrogance or your sense of humility. And that is one of the great secrets to working on kas. And I have one more. One more technique that I have a Masorah from my Rebbe that works, and it's the easiest. You see, these first three, in fact, all of them really take a lot of work. And the fourth is so easy, it's almost a joke. And the first one is very, very hard. You have to actually be happy. That's very hard. It takes years and years of work. And the second one, learning to have Bitachon, learning that Hashem runs every facet of this world, also takes a lot of work. And even this third one, working on humility, takes years and years. I have a Masorah from the Rosh Yeshiva of an easy way to eliminate kas. And I'll share with you that system. When I was first married, we were, what's the word? Dirt poor. Yeah, that's a word. Dirt poor. And the apartment that we moved into needed a painting. So I had a friend of mine who was still single. And, we had talked about, should I hire a painter? He said, "Nah, we'll do it ourselves. Come on, I'll help you. We'll do it ourselves." I had never painted anything before. As it turned out, he also never painted anything before. And we set out to paint this apartment. And it was, the Keystone Cops. It was pretty humorous. And apparently, at some point, we got to this old radiator. These apartments that were built in maybe the 1820s, or somewhere in that range. And this radiator had been painted over paint and peel after peel. And I don't know who said it first, but one of us said to the other, "How do you paint the radiator?" "I don't know. How do you paint the radiator?" "I don't know." Now, don't ask me how this happened, but somehow my wife and I were speaking to the Shiva, and I either left the room or something, and my wife apparently mentioned this story. And the Shiva started laughing. "How do you paint the radiator?" I guess he saw us both in our paint-speckled clothing, sitting there looking at each other. "How do you paint the radiator? How do you paint the radiator?" And he found it so funny, and he started laughing. When I came in the room, "How do you paint the radiator?" Every time I would come back to the Shiva, initially on a very regular basis, but as I moved away and the distance and time became greater, and it would be sometimes only once a year that I would actually get to see the Rosh Yeshiva, the first thing that he would say as I'd walk in the door, "How do you paint the radiator? How do you paint the radiator?" I brought my son when he was 13 for bracha to the Rosh Yeshiva, and the first thing the Rosh Yeshiva started doing, "How do you paint the radiator?" And my son didn't know what to make of this, because there's a Gadol Yisrael, my Rebbe, and what is the joke? How do you paint the I don't even get it. And my friends, I want you to understand, the Rosh Yeshiva is a very, very serious person, extraordinarily principled. If the man makes a decision, nothing will budge him. But he always told us the following: you must have a sense of humor. You must maintain a sense of humor. Life has too many knocks. There's too much going on. If you don't learn to laugh at yourself, if you don't learn to laugh at the situation, you're going to break. And over, Margal Bafume, constantly I heard the Rosh Yeshiva tell us, you must have a sense of humor. You must learn to look at the light side of things. You must learn to laugh. And the Rosh Yeshiva practiced it all of the years. And I knew the Rosh Yeshiva. The Rosh Yeshiva was always very jovial, very in a light mood. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, the Rosh Yeshiva was very, very serious about life, about issues. But there was a general sort of lightheartedness. My friends, if you would like to avoid anger, the best, simplest, quickest cure to all anger is developing a sense of humor. Because when you take a barb or a comment or a jab and you just sort of laugh it off, and it's over. It diffuses the energy, diffuses the situation, and everybody laughs. And if you could learn to laugh at yourself, it's even better. Because there are a countless number of times when we blow it, and we should rightfully get frustrated, angry, whatever. And if you train yourself to learn to find it humorous, to find the funny side, you're going to have a lot easier time in this thing called life. Because in the busyness of life and the various interactions and the heavy traffic of people, one with the other, what you quickly find is that a sense of humor is an invaluable tool for people getting along, certainly for getting along with your children, and kal v'chomer ben beno shel kal v'chomer, getting along with your spouse. Training yourself in a sense of humor, and training yourself to take a light attitude, to taking a very easy attitude about life is a huge, huge factor. However, all of this takes work, whether it be directly working on the midah, working on my attitude, working on a sense of humor. So I want to share with you just a couple of motivational points to want to really work on anger. And the simplest, strongest motivational point that I know is something that's illustrated with the following story. As the story goes, this belligerent samurai, who was a really bellicose, real fighter, comes to the Zen master, sits down pretending to be humble, and says, "Master, I've been wondering, what is it like in hell?" The Zen master looks at him, looks him up and down and says, "I should answer a puny person like you?" At which point the samurai turns beet red, furious, and reaches for his sword and says, "I should kill you for those words." At which point the Zen master says, "That's hell." Whether you like the expression or not, there's a deep yesod there. Have you ever seen a person when he's angry? Somehow, this is not the expression. You don't see angry people smiling. There's an angry face that looks like this. And there's a very direct correlation between anger and pain. As a matter of fact, it's very difficult to tell whether the person's angry or in pain. If you take a snapshot of a guy when he's furious and you don't know the background, you just see the picture, is he angry or in pain or I don't know? But one thing I promise you, he is not in pleasure. He's not having a good time. He's angry. He's furious. And when you're angry, nothing is fun. Not the food you eat, not the company you keep, nothing, anything you have becomes ugh. And there's an Orchos Tzadikim, quotes a Gemara, it's a fabulous expression. If you want to have no life, you have the expression, no life? It says if you want to have no life, develop a temper. Because when you have a temper, there's no hana in your life because you're angry and you're angry and you're angry. And when you're angry, nothing is fun. And my friends, that should be a huge motivation. You see, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that if you develop a temper, or if you allow your temper to remain where it is, you're going to say many, many things out of anger that you're going to come to regret. You're going to say things to your children. You're going to say things to your spouse. You're going to say things to your boss. You're going to say things to your workers. You're going to say many, many things, do many things that you're going to regret. And that doesn't take a rocket scientist. It also doesn't take a huge, huge philosopher to understand, as the Gross says, if the whole reason we're here is to be misaki in our midos, if when I leave this earth I am exactly what I am, WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, and if I don't work on my anger, then I'll be angry, that'll be a part of me for eternity. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that it's significant and important to work on anger. But the huge chiddush is, forget that. Forget other people. Forget Olam Haba. If you want to enjoy your stay on this planet, anger is one of the greatest thieves of happiness. It's like a hole right there in your bathtub, drawing out everything you have, because when you're angry, you're ticked, you're not happy, and it's a huge, huge expense. I think there's a tremendous lesson to learn from Hillel. That lesson is that there is a direct correlation between anger and humility. You see, when you're dealing with anger, if you understand how anger works, you understand that there really is an anatomy to the rage. We're aware there's a mitzvah, say, to work on our midos, and what that means is there's a way to do it. Chazal give us the formula. The formula is to understand how you get angry, why you get angry, and you understand how to work on it. The first yesod to understand is that anger isn't logical. It's not something I think about, plan, and decide to do. Rather, it's a reaction. And as a matter of fact, when the boss said those words, and I go back for an entire hour saying the words over and over in my brain, and I go and smash my closet door, that's dumb. But it wasn't supposed to be smart. It's kas, it's a midah, it's a certain thing, it's a reaction, and it's not necessarily subject to intelligence. Once you understand that, you understand how Chazal say, you have to work on it, you have to focus on it as a midah. The first thing to understand is that kas is like a balloon. Much like that balloon initially, if you've never gotten angry, the balloon is very taut, very hard to blow up. If you've never gotten angry, it's not so easy to get you angry. But once you get angry to this point, it's a lot easier the next time. If you get angry again, the balloon is stretched. Again, it's stretched. You get even angrier, so the balloon now becomes this big. Enough. Finally, it's very easy. And then the frequency, the amount of times you get angry, the intensity, how angry you get, the duration, how long you stay angry, it will happen again and again. The great secret to kas is not to get angry. Once you don't get angry for that amount of time, slowly the balloon starts coming back to its position in weeks, months, years. Finally, it can be as taut as it was originally, and then it takes an awful lot to get you angry. But understanding how I could prevent myself from getting angry is the trick. The first thing to understand is that when he says something, initially I'm just ticked. I'm not furious. I'm just a little bit angry. It's easy. All I got to do then, take out my index card, make a mark, and I could stop it. It's when it starts building. It's when it starts building and building and building. When I start venting, and then I tell this one, and I tell that one, and even if I don't tell anybody, I say it in my mind, and I get angrier and angrier and angrier until it's a volcano. There's no one who could stop it then, but anyone could stop it at the earlier point. But the bigger chiddush, and this is what we see from Hillel, is that there's an even earlier point that it can be stopped on. Because that first nanosecond, when he said that line, I have to interpret it. You see, he called me a geek, he called me a dork, he called me ugly, but do I react to that in what way depends on my interpretation. And those are greatly subject to me. If I have a real simcha zachayim, if I have real joy in my life, I don't get angry as easily. And that's something that we can work on. If I am the type of person who really works on bitachon, I see this person as but a shliach of Hashem, I don't get angry. But the third way is exactly what we learned from Hillel. When Hillel was called out, each one of those was a test to his humility, because at the end of the day, my arrogance, my sense of importance is what's going to cause me to get angry. A chutzpah, you speak to me that way. A chutzpah, you address me that way. The anger is exactly what causes me to interpret things always to the ra. The flip side to that is humility. It makes it a whole lot easier for me not to get ticked. But again, the final point of this whole system is Rishiva's technique, which is having a sense of humor. Because when you have a sense of humor, nothing has the same gravity, nothing has the same impact. It's a lot easier, life is easier, and that's one of the great tricks to life. Let me close with one last observation. And that is, when this man finally failed, he tried 3 times, time after time, and each time he failed, he finally says these words. Are you Hillel? Hillel says yes. If so, lo yirbu k'moscha b'Yisrael. There should be no more like you in Yisrael. At which point Hillel says, and why is that? So he explains that I lost 400 zuz because of you. At which point Hillel says the words, it's kedai, it's very worthwhile. You should lose 400 zuz and another 400 zuz rather than the great Hillel being angry. Now, my friends, if you even pay slight attention to those words, you recognize that at that point, clearly Hillel blew it, because that is not very humble. It's worth you losing 400 zuz and another 400 zuz rather than Hillel being makbid. If this Gemara is teaching us humility, that does not seem to be the prime example. That sounds like arrogance. And in another Shmuz, I mentioned this mashal, and I'd like to repeat it because I think it well defines exactly this point. When people discuss humility and arrogance, typically they misunderstand the midah. If you want to understand humility, if you want to understand arrogance, here is what I consider a very apt mashal. Imagine we're on a building scene, large construction site, And in the middle of the construction site is a very powerful crane. And this crane is lifting up huge boulders back and forth and back and forth. And the operator of this crane is Joe. Joe smokes 2 packs a day, a big pot belly, chain smoker. And he's the guy who operates the levers up and back. At a certain point, you walk over to Joe, and Joe, 50 pounds overweight. Joe, you're smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. You gotta get on a diet, go to the gym and work out. At which point Joe looks over and goes, me work out? You know what I do all day? I lift thousands of pounds, rocks back and forth. I don't need the gym. All day long I'm lifting. Joe, you're not lifting. The crane is lifting. You're just operating the levers. That, my friends, is exactly this nakuda. I was put into a body. I'm a little guy. I have the ability to move these arms and legs. But this is an Adam. When I speak, it's a human speaking. These are diburs. These are actions, mices of an Adam who is fit to create the heavens and earth. I'm that little operator inside. I'm a little guy. I didn't create these hands. I don't know how to weave the various neurons of the brain. I don't know how to put it together. But I sit there. I tell the arm. I tell the leg. But you see, I recognize that I'm that little guy inside. But the body, the who I am, could be huge. And understanding that I'm an Adam. And what I accomplish in this world could be fantastic and huge. But still understanding that I'm that little guy inside, and therefore there's no credit due to me, is the balance that most people lack. Most people either have a zero self-esteem or they're bombastic. The Adam HaSholem has a very clear understanding of who he is and what he can accomplish. And he also has a very clear sense of who am I. I'm that little crane operator, but he doesn't lose sight of the fact of who he is. Hillel knew quite clearly it's Kedai that Hillel shouldn't lose his temper, that you should lose 400 zuz and 400 zuz because I am Hillel, the Nasi. On the other hand, he wasn't arrogant. Who am I? Miani, because he was a little crane operator. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu grant us the wisdom, understanding, and ability to put this into practice. Oh, one more thing before I forget. Next week, there is no Shmuz. I'll be in California, Mitzvah Hashem. But the week after, we'll resume back here again. But we are going to start in Mitzvah Hashem at 8:45 sharp. So please be here.
Is good tomorrow?
Yes.